something happens and it doesn't go wrong. All right, now. All right, so for the average, like this is what your average is. If you raise your hand if you have other classes. This one doesn't, so I know you don't have this class. Other classes that all they grade is quizzes. Like there's no grades for classwork. Science, some of the science classes, when you're in science, some of the English classes did it last year. So a few of you. So this would be an easy thing to do in those classes. Well, there's one assumption that I'm making for those classes. So you'd have to check on this. Odds are, though, it would be true. So if we have a 100, right? We have an 80 on our next one. What we do is we add those together, get 180, and then we divide. Now, I almost never use this, what I'm about to use, but just to show it here, I'm going to. I'll pretty much never use that kind of division symbol. I'll use a fraction line, like 2/3 would be 2 divided by 3. So just know I'm never going to use this. Normally I'll write it like this, but since I already have the line there, I'm just using the division symbol to make it a little more, or a little easier to read. We now divide by the number of, in this case, quizzes. If it was something else, you divide by the total number of whatever it was you were taking the average of. Total number of can't even come up with a single example. Like take the average of all kinds, total number of different weights. Like if I was doing the average weight of our average height, I'd take all the heights and then take the total number of heights, and I would divide all the heights added together, divided by how many different people, how many heights we had. So divided by 2, because we only had 2 quizzes, and I get, that's the calculation. But what did you write for number 4? The assumption.
It's 75.
4.
Oh. Take the number in the middle of both numbers. So
Yeah, isn't this number 90? If we had a little number line, like we can even do a little number line, 80, 100, a little line segment. So it's actually a segment, not a line, not a number line. Isn't 90 right in the middle of that? Like exactly. It's 10 away from 100, and it's 10 away. Maybe. So that's not really why it's a measure of the middle, but then we use the calculation to get it. But that's that concept. We're trying to figure out, hey, I don't want to know how you did on your worst test. I don't want to know how you did on your best test. I want to know, like, where were you at the middle? Like, what was your kind of middle score, or really, what was your average score for the class? That's what your fair grade is. What about, so now I want you to all, if you didn't do it, do number 3. I gave you like 30 seconds. You should be able to do number 3, no problem. Oh, you'll need calculators, so might as well just grab the calculator now. We're kind of into the lesson now. So go ahead and grab calculators. If you have your own, that's fine. There's no super complex math today, pretty much any no phones though. We do not use phones for calculators, so don't have your phone out and think that you'll be using your phone for the calculator. Not really what happened. Sure you have a calculator. What? All right, so now with the calculator, do number 3. Find the average when instead of 2 quizzes, we have a 100 on our what was our 100 on our classwork average. Actually, this is another pretty common scenario too. A lot of you have classes where you have classwork grade and homework. I'm sorry, and test grades. Like that's the only 2 things. So it's not all quizzes. There is a grade for classwork. Find the average on that one. Like 10 more seconds, shouldn't take long. Who has a number? Dave, right? So like they got 75, right? You took 100. And you took 50, you added them together, you got 150, you divided by 2, and you got 75. Right in the middle, 25 away from 100, 25 away from 50. Here's my question. Here's where we get into the tough part. What did we assume in number 2 and 3 when we did that? What? By the way, I'll be super impressed with this. I mean, you're wrong. What did we assume?
Like, I understand that it's in between like 150, I understand that part, but dividing it by 7, I mean,
Why are you not sure if that makes sense? 'Cause there's one thing you could say would be the correct answer to this question. Which, like I said, I'd be impressed if you get the correct answer. It's not something before this lesson, it's not something that would pop into a lot of people's heads. I'm asking all of you another question. What do you think? You're Yana, correct?
yeah. So 2 is considered percents. 11 first 10. And specifically said that you got an 80 on the second. It doesn't necessarily say specifically what it is, it just says average in class rate, wisdom.
And again, it's the same concept as one. It's just here we're doing 2 quizzes. Here you would think about it as 2 grades. So it's still, it doesn't have to be the same unit. Like we don't, like all the numbers don't have to come from quizzes. If we're talking about grades, these are still both grades. So they are in the same group. It's just their grade now. So that's fine. We can still do it that way. Let me raise your hand if you have this scenario in a class where you have quizzes and classwork that make up your grade. Raise your hand. Should be pretty much everybody. Like there are some classes like across the school that do this, and I'm sure you have one of those types of classes. Let me ask you this question, and maybe you don't know this. You should, again, if you care about your grades, you should understand how the teachers are grading you, how they're giving you a grade for the class. Do they say that the quizzes count more than the classwork? Or do they say that they're the same, like they count, they're just as important if I read quizzes? Usually, like I used to actually do the third one. I don't do it anymore. The district kind of pushed us through and math to just do quizzes. But when I did this, I didn't count classwork as important as quizzes. Why might I not do that, especially? Or homework even more so. If I give you homework and I count that just as much as a test, what might be the flaw in that thinking on my part? That's more serious. Maybe they don't like really care. A lot of people didn't do their homework. I used to give homework long time ago. A lot of people didn't do it, so it just always drug people down. I'm like, well, if I make homework super important, everybody's going to get a much lower grade because nobody's doing their homework. But what's another? Let's show you how that's a better answer, really, but it's a more cynical answer than I do. What's that? So why would I maybe want to count the quizzes as more than the classwork or homework? Mostly, this really applies to homework. If your homework was for a grade, let's just say, I gave you homework and I said, all I'm grading is homework. Not grade, I don't care how you do on quizzes. That's all I'm going to grade. What do you think people would do? They went home and I'm not there. And you look it up, you find a way to get every paper would come back in perfect. So that's why first of all, people weren't doing it really. That was the biggest reason. But I stopped grading homework. The district actually pushed us to not grade classwork. So just like a lot of classes, just like I used to do, quizzes are more important. But we just assumed that there was a number in the middle that was the average. So we assumed in our estimate, when you did the average and you took the number in the middle, You assumed these were just as important as each other. You assumed that the two quizzes were just as important as each other. Sometimes they're not, and that's what that number means. Sometimes one thing is way more important than the other thing. Like the definition of that, we literally call that sometimes things have like a heavier weight. It's weighted more heavily. So if it is weighted more heavily, so let's say now we have that same number line. Actually, let's do 50 because that will give us more numbers we can use to estimate. So we have the 50, we have the 100. Now I tell you, and again, this is your quiz. This is your homework, we'll say. And I tell you quizzes. Somebody didn't really feel like doing homework, but they did well on quiz. They knew their math, they just didn't, they're lazy. I tell you quizzes are 4 times as important as classwork, we say. Well, homework. Quizzes are 4 times as important. So way more important than homework. Now, what would you think would happen? So if they were the same, right? Our average we said would be, boy, do my best. Yeah, right in the middle. I'm doing my best to try to put it right in the middle. So if they were the exact same, we said that's our average. Right in the middle, it's the same distance from both of them because they're both as important. What about if quizzes are way more important, 4 times more important? What's going to happen to that point?
So it would go.
Yeah, it's going to go more toward the important thing. It's going to go. So here's what you need to write down. The point always moves towards the heavier, so the one with more weight, toward the heavier point. Or points. Sometimes there's multiple points and they all have different weights. So if I'm putting a point in the middle of this, if I'm putting a point in between these two, if I know the middle is there, but I know this is weighted way more heavily, that point C, or whatever we would call it, that point would slide. It would not be 75 anymore. That would not be our weighted average, is what we call this. So the other one is just an average. This is called a weighted average. The average is going to be way down here because we did really well on the important thing. Really well. We got 100. So our average is going to slide somewhere down here, like somewhere in that range. Could be anywhere from certainly higher than 80 because 80 is just barely to the right of the middle. So, I mean, it might slide all the way down to 85, 90, maybe even a little higher than 90. Because this grade was so important. It's weighted so heavily. It's so heavy. It's pulling the normal average. So when we just take it and divide it by the total number of things, everything's worth the same amount. Everything's the same importance. It's pulling that normal average toward the heavier, more important weight. Or when you do line segments, it's going to be actual points. We'll have point, like this would be point A, this would be point B, and we'd be putting point C on the line segment based on the numbers we have, but we also have to consider the weights, right? Okay, say it again. What's your question?
Where's the column numbers 24? Not the weight.
Well, so let me just go back to, we have the points with the data. So this is actually, do you guys have that written? Tell you what, let's do a note, and then I'll label it all out because I have more room on the next screen. That's kind of the lesson. Sometimes the bell work leads into the lesson. Once I get your answers and I just keep working, that's pretty much the lesson. We were done with the bell work. You guys give me your numbers. So here we go. Let's talk about an actual problem. So again, we're talking about weighted at finding. It's really find a point. If you want to write a title, this is what we're doing. And it's up on the board. Remember, I'll write it up on the board as well. So find a point on a line using weights. So if you're like confused about what we're even doing, we're finding a point on a line using weights. And again, I'm gonna talk kind of about scores, but really the scores are just the numbers on the line segment. So it's kind of like the link, actually it is the link. Was this from the front?
Yeah.
Desk? Okay. Just curious if they were still open in the tardy. Actually, tell you what, let's stop talking about quizzes in classroom. Let's just talk about line segments. So this line segment is kind of like a number line. It's just that the number line doesn't start at 0, it starts at 50 and it goes to 100. So it'd be, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, all the way up to 100. My first question to you is, how long is that line segment? 50, right? So here's one thing you have to remember if you didn't already know this. Length or distance, you could really say distance also. So length / distance, all right. It is really just subtraction. You're just taking in this case, in line segments, it'll always be the biggest number subtract the smallest one. That's not always the case in math, but so we'll say length is distance. Because let me ask you this. If I measure the length of something, can I get a negative number? No, I can't get a negative number for length. Like if I'm measuring, there's got to be something there to measure. I can't measure something that's less than a 0 length. Like that, it doesn't exist. So big number, subtract little number is kind of your formula. If you just want to, if you're a formula process person, length is big number, subtract little. On a line segment, and make sure you refer to line segments for this stuff. So all we did, and we could just count. We could say, well, from 50, I go 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. So that works too if it's a really small distance between two things, but it's really subtraction. So, we said 100, subtract 50. So the length of that is 50. Now, if I want to put a point C on the line segment between, oh shoot, I didn't do one thing. Let's go back. I want to show you one thing. If we still using quizzes, so I said we were going to stop using them. What if I said, what did I say? How important were quizzes? 4 times?
Yeah.
So if quizzes are 4 times as important as your homework, here's what that means in a new formula. We can't just add them both together, right? We can't add them together and divide by 2 anymore because quizzes are way more important. Shouldn't be in the middle. If quizzes are 4 times more important, it's like you really have 4 quizzes of that same grade. So I would say, okay, well, if these are 4 times important compared to homework, then I have 4 quizzes. Not 1,000. We didn't get 1,000. That'd be a good grade. So I just say, okay, well, instead of just one of those to show how important they were, I'm going to give myself 4. And then we still need the 50. Now we can just do an average calculation. We add all these together. Now again, but now we're ignoring the fact that we had 2 numbers there and we're treating it like we have 5 numbers because these were more important. So we have to weight it more heavily. When we weight it more heavily by giving us more of those. And you'll see that actually we'll finally find out where it falls exactly if we were right. Like I would estimate it falls like higher than 90 probably. So if we add all those up, do it in your calculator. Everybody now you're just figuring out the average the way I said. You add, I didn't really tell you. You add all of the grades up. Before we only had 2, now we have 5. You add all of the grades up. So you know what sum means? S-U-M? Yeah. Like it's the answer to an addition problem. So that's really the word I should be using. You take the sum of all of the quizzes now that you've weighted the one more heavily, whichever one was weighted more heavily. And then I'm just going to write add all I'll just say numbers of. Add all numbers and divide by how many numbers. So we would add them all up and we get what? Well, we get 450 and then we divide it by how many, which is 5. And the average is 90, which is about where we said. We said, okay, well, it's going to pull it way down here. So somewhere in there. I actually thought it might be a little higher than 90, but. So yeah, that makes sense, right? They were weighted way more heavily. So instead of being at 75, it pulled it, the heavier weight, pulled it all the way down to 90. You really had an 8. Even though you had a 50 on that, but it wasn't really super important. I'll tell you what, just for the heck of it, do this on your own. What if homework was weighted 3 times as heavy or as important as quizzes? Solve it. Homework is 3 times as important as quizzes. Same grades, 50, 100. What would you get in that scenario? Once we go through that, we'll start on the actual formula. If you're a formula person and you're like, you can memorize stuff really well, there will be one at the end of this. I hate just giving a formula and just saying plug numbers in, because then you forget the formulas by the time you have the EOC. But if you understand it, then you're normally pretty good. Get an answer? Is that what people are getting? Hear it? 60, what was it, 245? All right. So I'm going to do it up on the board if you didn't get that or you just are like, I have no idea. So this is 3 times as heavy, is what I said. We still have a grade here. Yeah, that's fine. I'll do what I was about to do on this. 3 times as heavy means it's 3 of those grades. Still have the 100, that doesn't go away. So that's 250. I'll grab that in a second. Divided by the total number of grades, which is now 4 now that we've used the weights. And yeah, and we get 62.5 as our grade in the classroom. There. Anybody ever had this continue?
I have the right.
Never found. For what?
It's right.
Yeah, math, should use math. So you don't have another math. The Spencer is the one about this hallway. No, math. Miss Pinsford. Yeah, that's the thing going. Yeah, she's the department head for math. We teach math. That's the way I have her. The one, she's in this hall. You have another class in this hall on the right. She just walked out her door. I make fun of her about something. I was just gonna say if you.
Yes, I don't.
Yeah, right. I would tell you what. That's 748. A long walk. I check everything if I haven't told you that. I check times on passes. I'll check with teachers and make sure that they've written you a pass or that you made it somewhere. If I give you a pass, I call the clinic or actually I email the clinic and say, hey, what time did so-and-so, like if you want to pass and you go to the clinic, what time did so-and-so check in and check out? Oh, I do have it. So just make sure. You do have this picture?
Yeah.
For what?
It says computer science for.
Oh, she does teach that one computer class. I forgot about that.
Oh, concrete.
I forgot about that, yeah. But she's in this hall, like on the right, right? You see her in this hall, okay. All right, so if we divide that by 4, 62.5 is the weighted average of homework, which makes sense. The middle is 75, so it pulled that 75 closer to the homework and pretty far down, all the way down to 62. All right, so now here's the formula part. And I'm going to start it by saying that the weights are even. That's what this means. If you have a 1-to-1 ratio, those are just weights, basically. Although that's not complete. But we're going to think of them right now as weights. We do another lesson where we have to kind of adjust it. So if they're evenly weighted, I only have one of each of them. That's what the ratio of 1 to 1 means. I can still do that same formula. So now be very detail oriented, because I'm giving you, especially if you're like a process person, this is the shortcut version. You gotta remember. You're gonna do this. You have the values on the line segment. The numbers, the values, whatever you want to call it. You need to add in the weights of each point. So the weights are just whatever the weight they give you. If I say it's 3 times more, 3 times weighted 3 times as much, then the weight is 3. So here I'm telling you when I say 1 to 1 that they are weighted evenly. So you might see, and I don't know how the district would say this. They might say weighted evenly. Weighted evenly. They might reverse the words evenly weighted. They might just say, they might not use the word weight at all. They might use a real world example and say the quizzes count the same, or the classwork counts the same as homework. So you may have to figure it out more when the district creates something. I don't know. Regardless, once you figure out what the weights are, and we're trying to put a point. So again, always understand what they're asking you to do. We're trying to put a point on the line, which would wind up being a number, like it's going to have a number value based on the weights. So we would say in this problem, weight of A. So when I write W, that means weight. There's a formula in the book that you're going to see. I don't use that. I'm very visual. It's the same thing, but there's more memorization with that than if you draw the picture out and then you do what I'm doing. So I'm big on not memorizing stuff and having, more of an understanding. So the weight of that is 1, because they're evenly weighted. They're the same. We're basically taking sort of the ratio and we're using the ratio, although that's technically not right. You have to make one adjustment to that, which we do have to do when we do the next lesson we do, which I won't get to. So now the weight of this, also 1. We said they were weighted the same. They were same values, same importance. So they're both weighted 1. So when we do this formula, here's the formula. You take the weight. I guess I'll write it all out in words first, and then you can look at the shortcut version of the book if you want and change to that. So it's the weight of 0.1. I'm going to say, actually here, let's do this. Trying to write it so that it doesn't matter what the name of the points. So weight of first point. I have to move this. I can have it for weight of the first point times the number value for that point. If you want to use a different, like if you think of it as something else, like whatever you would call that 50, you use your own words. Again, I said it's important that you understand it. Don't. So if what I'm saying, then the number line value or whatever I wind up writing doesn't make sense to you, use your own words. You don't have to write exactly what I write. I will say number line value. That doesn't make sense. Can't figure that out later, you think? Well, and another one, so you just got it to the front, I guess, right? Yeah, I just can. So it sounds like it already was closed. All right, so again, well, we'll solve it out in a minute. Then we're going to add that, and now we're just going to basically be repeating that same thing. So I'm going to do a shorter version of it. So we take the weight, not an H though. So WGHT of the set. Oh, I know what I could have done. Well, could have written first like that. Weight of the second point, and then times that number line value. Number line value. You have trouble seeing that. I can zoom in and show it. Yeah, actually, tell you what. This is the one thing I do love as opposed to a whiteboard. If I make a mistake, not only can I erase it on this, I can actually move stuff around, unlike there. Oh. What? Oh. So good. Oh, here, I'll do this. There we go. All right, so that's the numerator. We're gonna then divide that by, so I've told you, I'm gonna draw like a fraction line to represent division. You wanna just write out in words that we take this and we're gonna do, once we've added both of those together, we're gonna divide that. So divided by, that line means divided by, always, any formula. That means divide the top by the bottom. You got to remember that too, because I will not explain that well, I'll probably say it real quick. But so that line means we're going to take all of this, add it together. We'll multiply those separately, then add them together. Hopefully you understand multiplication comes first, right? Remember order of operations. So we have to multiply these first, then we would add those two results together. You can't just go left to right and do it. Your calculator sometimes will take care of that order of operations for you. Sometimes it won't. Just make sure you understand how to do it. And then we divide that by the weights added together. And again, a shorter version of that is the sum of the weights, sum meaning all of them added together. So all of the weights, I'll say. If you're a little confused, don't worry. When you see let's actually do it. So we're just taking notes right now. So, oh, this is in your book, by the way. You're going to see it in your book, but it's different, very different. They just give you this formula and say plug stuff in. Anything. So you need, Jacob, you got to get paper out, bud. You come in late, you missed virtually the whole lesson. So the formula part, though, luckily for you, is probably going to be able to get you through today. But any questions on anything I wrote? You just can't see it, or you're not sure what I'm talking about, or maybe why I did it?
The last one at the top row that says.
Yeah, it says number. So that would be the second point, the value of that on the number line for the second point. Okay, now that I have more room, I move it again. Again, if that number line value thing doesn't make sense, you're not going to remember that. Whatever you would call that is what I'm talking about. Bring the 100 part for the second point. So for the first point, that's the number line value. For the second point, that's the number line value. Let me just do one example and then you'll go. Because once I do this, I'm done and you guys are going to work. Probably we'll just do this for the rest of the class. All right, so now let's use well, actually you do it. You don't. Normally I do one, but I'm hoping that is super self-explanatory and you kind of know what the answer is anyway. I told you this is really just the same thing as the normal average, so you should get 75. So try to use the formula here. And if you don't get 75, try it again. Because if they're both evenly weighted, if they're both the same importance, we know it's just the number in the middle of those two numbers, what we should get. We should get 75. So should get the number right wherever the middle is, somewhere about there. If you don't get that, try again. If you still don't get that, you can call me over real quick. I gotta figure out which color. So go ahead, do that real quick. If you get the 75, I'll come back there and check it. Check your formula and everything and just make sure you're good, and then you can head out. Oh, sure doesn't. Here. This have the pages. Yep. So we skipped 2 lessons and actually went forward and did this lesson. So I didn't really have you look at your books yet. Because I think once you learn this, it actually makes the other lessons. I wound up doing it, repeating last year, the lessons that we skipped anyway, and doing it after this anyway, because people understood this better. That's problems. Oh, you're gonna do the examples because they're already worked out for you too, but. Actually, I have you do those first. All right, so Ray, well, I'll ask, is anybody having trouble that's willing to like say, yeah, you're not getting it? So glad when I have kids in here that aren't scared. This is the first time we've done one. Well, I mean, we did them in other ways, but like, how did you just plug stuff in, or you're not even sure where to put stuff?
I'm not sure how to plug it in.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and do it. You guys are gonna tell me anyway. I think we can probably, if I zoom in, we could probably squeeze everything in that one little spot over there. Yeah, you guys should have the formula. I'm gonna kind of scroll that off the screen. So what is the first, so we're doing the top part, the numerator. What's the first thing that I'm doing? Plug in, that's what. I write what? Like I specifically want to know, what do I write? What's the first thing in the formula? Weight of the first point. Like you're just plugging stuff in. Once you have a formula, you start at the left side of that formula and if there's a fraction, you start on the top of the fraction. We're just writing stuff in for each one of those. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, I write it all in first. You could go ahead and do a piece and then a piece. And then, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things should be in our formula. 5 numbers. And they all come from this picture where I have the 100, the weight of 1, the 50, and the weight of 1. So they all are going to come from there. So what is the weight of 0.1? 0.1 would be the far left point A in this case.
1.
Oh, 50 is not it. 50 is the number line value. 1 is the weight. That's why we wrote W equals 1 underneath both of them. Because weight would be the whatever. They'll give you that in the problem, by the way. Like that's never something you have to figure out. Well, unless they made it really difficult. You could have to solve backwards, but I don't think they ever did that. So when they give you a weight and they say, if they said B was 3 times or weighted 3 times A, then the weight of B would be 3. You're going to see that. So weight of 1, I just write a 1. That's the weight of 0.1. Now I say, okay, well, that needs to be multiplied times, what's the next thing? So that's the 50, the number line value. Make sure if this doesn't make sense, you need to write words that make sense to you. Yeah. It's not safe to say big number and little number, because you might have a number line that looks like this. We start at 0.5 and we go to 0.9. You might be figuring out where does something fall in between decimal numbers. So you can't just say big number, little number. That will not work. Probably would work most of the time, but just make sure you don't do that. Somehow you need to understand which number you're talking about. All right, so 1 times 50 was the value of the first point. The weight of the first point, number line value, whatever you want to call it, of the first point. So all of this will be the first point. Like you notice, I didn't write that. First point. First point stuff always stays together. Second point stuff always stays together. I wouldn't want to multiply the weight of the first point times the value of the second point. That wouldn't make any sense. All right, so now I write what? Plus, yeah, I'm just using the formula. Like I don't ever replace math. Like I'm never going to change the multiplication to something else. Never going to change the addition. Never going to change that. Never going to change division. All I'm doing is, these are variables. I mean, these are just all variables. I'm just plugging in numbers for the variables because I know what they are in the figure. So plus, what do I write now? Yeah, it's 1 again, right? The weight of the second point is also 1. What do I write now? Times, well, not times 10, 100, right? Times 100. This, by the way, is why I do it the way I do it. In the book, you're going to see a more complex formula where it has W1, something, something, W2, like all this stuff. If you just draw it out, this just all goes together. You multiply those two. I'm giving you the even shorter version than the formula now. But you just multiply those two things together. You just multiply those two things together. Then you add those two numbers together, and then you divide by the total sum of all the weights, which is where we're at now. So what do I write on the bottom? Not 150, you're adding the number line values, the weights, remember the weights. It's because this part down here is remember when we did quizzes, like we did the value or the average of the quizzes? This part down here is basically saying, how many quizzes did we have? And when we weighted one quiz more heavily, we had more, like we gave 100, 100, 100, 100. Then we had 5 total quizzes. That's really what this is, kind of like how many quizzes. Well, in this case, we would have a 100 and a 50, so we just have a total of 2. But we don't add the 150, it's how many of those scores or values did we have. If you don't understand what I'm saying, then you just memorize formula. Add all the weights together for the. So the weight of the first point was 1, the weight of the second point was 1. Here, you can do it another way. So we say 1 plus 1. The weight of the first point plus the weight of the second point. Now, if you solve it out, you should get 50 plus 100 divided by 1 plus 1. So that's the same exact thing we did at the very beginning of the bell work. If they were weighted evenly, we just add them together, divided by how many of them. We did get 75, which is what I told you. Should get. Any questions on that? You're gonna practice way more of them if you're still lost. They're gonna, the weights, it's pretty rare you would ever see a one like evenly weighted average problem. That's not really, I mean, it is a weighted average, but it's the same as the normal average. So normally you're gonna have weights in the problem. But I just wanted to show you that one. Oh, does anybody know what that point is called, by the way? A point that's right in the middle. It does create 2 smaller segments. So going back to our little plus big, 25 plus 25 would equal the total of 50. We're kind of bringing in a quick review of our last one. 25 plus 25 is 50. But what's true about these 2 little segments? This is bringing the last thing to learn. Anything, tell me something that's true about this segment here. So this segment, here, I'll use colors are very helpful in referring. What is true about the blue and the green line segments? They're the same length, right? They're both 25. So what could we also put into that picture that we learned? What new little thing about? The what? We'll come back to that in a second, but there was something that was drawn into a figure. I showed you these new things. They were called some weird word. Oh, I'll go to Marcus first. You should have it in your notes. It was the last thing you actually did in your notes. It was the last thing I showed you real quick so that you could finish problems 28 through 33. There's a word, starts with a C.
I know what you're talking about. I just don't remember what it's called.
No, that was going way back. Last thing you did, if you were here last time.
Oh.
No, that goes back to naming points, lines, and planes. Oh, yeah,
Oh, it was.
congruent. Remember, congruent means equal. Congruent means same measure, equal. Really, technically, congruent means if you take that line segment and you put it on top of that line segment, they would match perfectly. That's really what congruent means. Has to do with shapes, just for a line, not a whole lot of shape to a line. So they are congruent. So remember these little marks we used? That would show me that those are congruent. They're the same measure. And then last but not least, there's a word for this specific point when it creates two equal line segments. There's a word. Couldn't come up with what I wanted to say would give away the answer. I'll say it in a minute. So that point is where relative to this whole line segment. Word I want you to see. Where is that point relative to like the whole line segment? It's where you actually wrote it. Helen, you wrote it. Oh, did you? Word from the word. Right. That word. What's that word? Middle. That point is right in the middle, right? So do you know what we call that point when it's right in the middle and it creates two equal line segments? Oh, Hal had his hand up. Isaiah. It is the average, but we call that point, it's a specific kind of point. It's the, not the halfway point. I mean, it is the halfway point, but there's a word that means halfway point. Not say it starts with M.
Midpoint.
Midpoint. There we go. So one of the whole lessons actually is just on midpoint. So that's where we're going to hopefully save some time on that lesson. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce it. So yeah, that's called whenever it creates two equal line segments and it's in the middle, the name of that is midpoint. Which makes sense. It's right in the middle. It's the midpoint. All right. So now I want you to do this problem. It's got different weights in it. You're doing this one here. That one. Okay, so draw that out. Right underneath each point, what the weight of the point is. And now we are no longer one-to-one. Is that what we just did? The weights were even. If the weights were even, that means that, because remember we said the heavier the weight, the more it pulls the average away from the middle. If they're the same weight, then it's going to be in the middle. Always, like if my weights would have been 3 and 3, it would have still been in the middle. It doesn't have to be 1 and 1. 3 and 3, it would still be in the middle. If you're confused, just try to duplicate the formula. And that's really all you need for my quiz. And then maybe in that process, we can work on like the understanding. But make sure you can do the formula. Let's see. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yep. Yeah, there's one little trick that we haven't talked about yet that I'll probably give you the answer to in like 30 seconds. And then I'll let you finish if you were stuck on that. So while you're working, you can kind of answer this. You can look at, hopefully you've drawn it out already and you have this part. What's the weight of point A? 3, right? So we write W, red, W equals 3. Does it tell you what the weight of B is? Doesn't specifically say B is weighted or B has a weight of or whatever, right? So what is the weight? It's just 1. Yeah. If it doesn't tell you anything about it, and that makes sense, right? Isn't 3 3 times 1? Like if you multiply 3 times 1, it's 3. So again, if that confused you a little bit, now you should be able to. Sometimes there won't be a 1. Like they might have said point A has a weight of 2 and point B has a weight of 7. And sometimes there won't be a 1 in it. Everything we've done so far has had a 1 in it, but if he ever needs the paper, it's over here, just so I'm sure you know that.
Future, composition.
Oh, yeah. And he can leave it in here. He can put it in the, oh, I don't know in what class I've said that. It's got a little fold in it. Second period is the top basket. So if you just want to leave your stuff in here, I don't assign homework. And if you know you're not going to work on anything at home, you can just leave it in here and it'll always be here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. Say what? If you're not done, keep working. I'm going to make a little more room to the left. Do the formula right there. All right. So I'm not going to rewrite the whole formula just because it's a little deep. I thought complex, but there's just a lot in it. So we're just going to start plugging stuff in. What's the very first thing in the formula that I need to write in, like replace? Well, say what's in the formula and then we'll put the number there. So we need to put the weight of the first point in our top left of the formula, which the weight of the first point is. So you should have written a 3. And then we do what? We're going to multiply that. Again, this is just all in the formula. And we write what? So now we write the number line value or whatever you're going to call that. The weight first, then, and again, here's the short version. You're just always multiplying those two things together. You're multiplying those two things together. That's why I like drawing it out. There's a lot less memorization because you won't have notes with that formula on it. But if you write it like here, all you got to remember is, well, I multiply the two that are up and down, and then I add those two left and right. So there's your visual. Multiply up and down on the ends, add those two numbers together. And then you just have to remember what the division part is. So 3 times 60 plus, so there's my plus. And then now what do I write? 1 times 100. Just again, you're multiplying the two that are up and down. And then last, but certainly not least, because sometimes people do add the wrong things on the bottom. What do I do on the bottom? I take all the weight. Sometimes there's actually 3 points. You'll see that in the book. I'm not going to do an example of it because it's still the same. Oh, actually, it's not the same exact formula. You would have to take the weight of the third times the number line value. But again, if there's a third point here and it has a weight of 2, and then my value was 80, again, I'm still multiplying vertically. Like there doesn't really change that much. And then I'm just adding all 3 of those together. You'll see that problem in there. So we say 3 plus 1. So now do the math. What is it? 180, 280 divided by 4. Is that what you got? So 70?
Yep.
So that would be the weighted average of the point C. So now, oh, and it does, I think I do on the quiz, and I know they do in the book. They want you to actually put that point on them. So 70, if this is 60, right in the middle of that would be 80, because that would be 20 away and 20 away. Well, if this is 80 here-ish, not horrible, it's not great. If this is 80, well, 70 is in the middle of those two things, right? 60 and 80 are both 10 away from 70, so I'd put it in the middle again. So that approximately would be where we'd see 7. So I think they do in the book. I don't remember if I do that on the quiz or not, say the truth on the way back. Oh, and this is not on Monday's quiz. So if you weren't here the other day, we have a quiz Monday. The quiz Monday, you notice I've changed to a different color. Quiz Monday is everything in blue. So you can take a picture on that on your way out or something if you haven't already. Or this, I don't have time to give you like a day where you just practice for a quiz, especially block day. So we have to do a new lesson, even though it won't be on the quiz Monday. So Sunday night, you need to make sure you understand you don't use this Monday. There's nothing about weighted averages on Monday's quiz. Don't use it. Make sure you only do this stuff over here. Which is like, what we did is find the missing length of a line segment. I can't remember back to what we did last class. All right, do another one. There you go. One more practice and then I'll turn it over to you and you can start working your book. I did 3 times as much as him. I'm gonna change that. Tell you what, change it. I don't want 3 times as much. It won't be proper English, but yeah, and I should have said point B has a weight. I can say that still. Again, not proper English, but so point A has a weight of 3, point B has a weight of 2. You will probably, hopefully you gotta grab a calculator because you'll get some decimals in these problems. In the book, maybe on my quiz, doesn't always come out to be a nice round integer. Decimals are numbers. Decimals. I might do one with like 3 points on it later as you guys work, if people are getting to that and if people struggle, but it's the same exact concept. It's just you're gonna multiply 3 times and then add those 3 values instead of just twice. But you still write the weight underneath each point. It's different from any of that. If they don't tell you what the weight of a point is, what's that pretty much always mean? What's the weight of 1? 1, right? So if they don't tell you, and then you can pretty much assume it's 1. Like they'd say it's 4 times as much as the other point or something like that. So the other point is just 1. All right, so I'm gonna get going a little faster. So hopefully you're done or wrapping it up. So people that are done can kind of start telling me what to write. What do I write underneath the A? How? What was it? W equals 3. It says point A is weighted 3. What do I write underneath the B? Bricklin. Yeah, I mean, it's really easy sometimes because it literally just says weight is 2, weight is 3, weight is 5, weight is 7. The only tricky ones, and that's why I did the first 2, is when it says 3 times or 4 times, you got to understand that means the other one is 1. So there you go. Now I'm not even going to use the formula now. I'm going to do it the way I was showing you before. I know I multiply those. I multiply those. I add that together. And then I divide all of that by 3 plus 2, the total of all the weights. So you should have gotten 3 times 5 is 15. Now I will write it over here smaller. Plus 2 times 1 is 2. And then divided by 5. So 17 divided by 5. So 3.4. Is that what you guys got?
Yeah.
All right. So here, I'll give you some problems to work on. Oh, and then to put it on the line. What in the world? I messed up. I totally messed it up. This is supposed to be 10 or something, I think. I didn't even notice until just now that I went from 5 to 1. So let's assume this. Oh, it wouldn't work then. Yeah, it wouldn't have worked. That's totally wrong then, by the way. We did it the correct way, so I'm not super worried about it. I'll change it for the other class. Yeah, so everybody on the recording, I'll change it for the next class, but just tell you what. No, let's do it again. Let's do one that makes sense. Thought I had written a number in there. Oh no. Oh, I hit the. It should still be there. There we go. So I hit the back button instead of delete. So here, do another one. Makes more sense. What in the world? Oh, bless you. There we go. Now do the problem over again. Oh, wait, but I still want you to do weight of 3 and weight of 2. The point, I'm going to change it, but your weights are the same. Point A has a weight of 3. Point B has a weight of 2. There. Now it makes sense. I think that was actually just an extra number line at the bottom. I didn't know was there. I think on the next screen. That's I'm going to write the problems up here that you're going to practice while you're finishing that one, so that'll work out. Oh, crap, we're not even done with the lesson in the shoot. Oh, I forgot one major part of it. Hold on. Now, we'll have to do that part fast next week then. We're going to be moving into the good news is when we do this lesson first, I think the other lesson becomes a lot easier, so we'll save time on that. And you'll see the complex formula when you look at the book pages with the examples. Yeah, we also did example 1 in the book. That's the only material we covered. Everything else is the stuff that I didn't get to. I forgot all about it. All right. Let's see. All we can really do is 1 through 6. That stinks. Oh, all I can see for now. Everybody done? Looks like people are pretty much done. We'll do that first. I'll find my pen and write it up. I can tell you. Actually, I'll write the problems for you up here first. All right. So what I do first, again, kind of already did it, but weight equals 3, right? Tells us point A is weight of 3. What about B? Tells us point B is weight of 2, right? I'm going to multiply those together, add them together, and then divide by the 3 plus the 2. So now if we do that, we get 36 plus 15, 51. That was on top, divided by 5. So now you should have gotten 10.2. Yeah. So go ahead. You don't really have a whole lot you can do. There's actually 2. I didn't do one with 3 points. Try to do that though. If you get one with 3 points, I don't even remember if the book has that or not, or if it's on the quiz, but if there was a 3rd point, like I said, you would just take the weight of that point. So let's say, I don't know what would be close to the middle, 9, 10, 11-ish. 10-ish we'll say, and let's say that had a weight of 2 also. Well, I just do the same thing. I multiply that, but now I have to add all 3 of those up. And then I would have to divide by 1 more weight. So that's all you have to do to adjust the formula. I'm not writing a whole new formula because you could theoretically have one with 5 weights. So we have to keep creating formulas for really the same process. All right. So your problems then are 1 through the only problems, unfortunately, you can do right now. 1 through 6, and they do have some problems with 3 points on them. So I'll leave that up there for the ones where they have 3 points, but just have to add in a 3rd weight and multiply them together. We're not packing up, like you're working on it. You got 20 minutes. So that doesn't let me back up. You can work when we're done. Oh, I'm sorry, right? Oh yeah, you got to get your pages. Duh. Get your pages out. I mean, we've already torn them out. Like it's the same ones we tore out, but get your pages out. We didn't really use them for the lesson, I forgot. So once you get them out, I'll tell you what page. It's the last It's the last lesson in that set of pages though, so it's like all the way to, yeah, page 47. So I'll write up on page 47, 1 through 6. If you want to look at the examples and try to figure out how to go past that, it's pretty similar. Same concept, it's just you have an X and a Y because you're doing on a coordinate plane, but we'll see how many you get done first and then. Yeah, I forgot. I totally forgot about the coordinate, which is the hardest part of the lesson. So unfortunately, we did the easier, but if you truly understand the concept on the easy problems, the concept is the same on the other ones too. It's just there's one extra little step there.
So yeah, I go in.
Oh, yeah, now we got plenty of time now for bathrooms, so. Oh, I do have to write a pass. You can grab a pass while you're coming up. Bring your phone to me though. Remember, we got trade. HAO, is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
The books with the pages are you looked out for doing that, right?
Do you not have the pages?
I only looked out to 45. Because I have 45 and 46, I just didn't have them.
So now there's the book.
Oh no, that one had 46. But it didn't have 45. Like,
Oh,
they
yeah,
all
those are the ones that have been ripped out in here. Three and 8:42. Okay, then the date is 17th of June. Now, yep. So today is the 17th. I did not change it, so if you wrote 16th, it's not right. If you even know it, Doctor. So go back and look at example 1 if you need to. I mean, hopefully I gave you all the easy ones. We didn't really get to any of the tougher ones with the coordinate plane stuff, so I think you should be fine on all of that.
That's the easiest I've seen this done.
Well, we're actually supposed to be like,
Easy.
if you go into somebody else's room, they're probably doing the ratios, the partitioning and ratios thing.
This is.
I skipped over it because last year when I did that first and I taught it the way it's supposed to be taught,
Yeah.
nobody understood it like this.
This is.
But everybody understood this when we did it like 2 lessons later.
That's great.
So I wound up going back and reteaching ratios anyway, using this. So I
That's the
decided this year to
easiest I've
change
seen
the
that
order.
because a lot of people get so confused. That's so easy.
We will see. We always think.
It is, that is just pretty awesome.
You have questions, you can work with each. I don't care if you work with people. Again, as long as we're working. You obviously, I'm here to answer questions. This is the time when I'm, oh, I haven't done attendance though, so I might do that real quick. I'll leave that up on the board while I do attendance though. Let's see, attendance. Why does my, oh, I can stop the recording too.